The morning sun cast long shadows across Forward Operating Base Meridian as Lieutenant Park Do-Yan stepped off the transport ship. His boots hit the metal deck with confidence. He carried his rifle case in one hand and his service record in the other. The record was thick with awards and commendations. Do-Yan looked around the base with sharp eyes. Everything was exactly as he expected. Gray walls, busy soldiers, and the constant hum of machinery. He had been to dozens of bases just like this. But this base was different. This base would make him famous. Lieutenant Park, a voice called from behind him. Do-Yan turned to see a young sergeant walking toward him. The woman was small, but moved with purpose. Her uniform was clean but worn. Her eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much fighting. "I am Sergeant Choi Nari," she said. "Commander Kim wants to see you right away." Do-Yan nodded and followed her through the base. Soldiers stopped their work to watch him pass. Word traveled fast in small places like this. Everyone knew the new sniper was coming. Everyone knew his reputation. The commander's office was simple. Desk, 2 chairs, and walls covered with maps and photos. Commander Kim Seo-jin sat behind the desk reading reports. He was older than Do-Yan expected, with gray hair and tired eyes. "Sir," Do-Yan said, standing at attention. Commander Kim looked up from his papers. "At ease, Lieutenant. Take a seat." Do-Yan sat down and waited. He had learned to let commanders speak first. It showed respect and gave him time to judge their character. "I've read your file," Commander Kim said. "Very impressive. 3 years of service. 15 different combat zones. Your accuracy rate is 97%. Thank you, sir. Your last commanding officer wrote that you are the best natural marksman he has ever seen. He also wrote that you have an ego problem." Jaw tightened slightly. "I am confident in my abilities, sir." "Confidence is good. Arrogance gets people killed." Commander Kim leaned back in his chair. "This is not like your previous assignments. Here, we fight a real enemy. The Kreks are not human. They do not think like humans. They do not fight like humans." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Commander Kim picked up a tablet and tapped the screen. "Let me show you our current statistics." The screen displayed a long list of names and numbers. At the top was a single entry that made Do-Yan's eyes widen. "Captain Lee Min-ji," Commander Kim read aloud. 847 confirmed kills over 3 years. She leads our sniper division. Do-Yan studied the number. It was impressive, but not impossible to beat. It killed over 300 enemies in just 6 months during his last assignment. "She is very skilled," Do-Yan said carefully. "She is the best we have," Commander Kim said. "But she will not be your direct superior. You will report to me and work with different teams as needed." "Yes, sir." Commander Kim stood up. "Your quarters are ready. Get some rest. Tomorrow morning, we brief for your first mission." Do-Yan left the office feeling confident. 847 kills in 3 years was good, but he could do better. He had always been the best marksman in every unit he joined. This would be no different. The next morning came with the sound of alarm bells. Do-Yan woke quickly and dressed in his combat gear. The base was alive with activity. Soldiers ran between buildings carrying weapons and equipment. In the briefing room, Do-Yan saw Captain Lee Min-ji for the first time. She was smaller than he expected. Black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her face was calm, but her eyes were alert. She sat at the front of the room with the other senior officers. "Listen up," Commander Kim announced. "We have 3 separate Kreks attacks happening right now. Teams Alpha, Beta, and Charlie will respond." The commander pointed to different areas on a large map. Alpha Team takes the mining station. Beta Team handles the convoy attack. Charlie Team covers the settlement raid. Do-Yan raised his hand. "Sir, which team am I assigned to?" "You are going with Beta Team," Commander Kim said. "Captain Lee will lead Alpha Team." The briefing continued for 30 minutes. Do-Yan learned about enemy positions, friendly forces, and mission objectives. It was standard information for standard missions. He felt ready. The first mission went perfectly. Do-Yan's team reached the convoy attack site within an hour. Krek's forces were spread out across rocky terrain, perfect for sniper work. Doyen found a good position and began engaging targets. His rifle felt comfortable in his hands. Each shot was precise and deadly. The Krek soldiers fell one by one. In 2 hours, he had eliminated 43 enemies. The convoy was saved with minimal friendly casualties. The second mission was even better. A Krek's patrol had been spotted near the base perimeter. Doyen took position on the outer wall and waited. When the patrol appeared, he was ready. 26 kills in 30 minutes. By the end of his first week, Doyen had accumulated an impressive kill count. He participated in 7 different engagements. His accuracy remained perfect. His speed was unmatched. In the mess hall, soldiers talked about the new sniper's performance. Stories grew with each telling. Some said he could hit targets from impossible distances. Others claimed he never missed a shot. Doyen enjoyed the attention but tried to remain humble. He sat with different groups each meal, sharing stories from his previous assignments. Younger soldiers looked up to him with admiration. After 10 days of combat, Commander Kim called another briefing. This time, he displayed updated statistics on the main screen. Current kill counts for the past 2 weeks, he announced. The list showed every sniper's performance. Doyen's name was near the top with an impressive number: 1,694 confirmed kills. Captain Lee Minji's name was still at the very top, but her number had barely changed: 847. Doyen stared at the screen in amazement. He had more than doubled her total in just 10 days. The room was quiet as everyone processed the information. "Outstanding work by all teams," Commander Kim said. "Dismissed." As the soldiers filed out of the briefing room, Doyen felt a surge of pride. He had proven himself beyond any doubt. His skills were clearly superior to anyone else on the base, including the famous Captain Lee. That evening in the mess hall, Doyen could not contain his excitement. He sat with a group of younger soldiers who hung on his every word. "I do not understand," he said, cutting into his meal. "How can someone with such low numbers be considered the best sniper here?" Sergeant Choi Nari, who was sitting nearby, looked up sharply. "What did you say?" "Captain Lee," Doyen said louder, not caring who heard. 800 kills in 3 years? "I did twice that in 10 days. The mess hall grew quiet. Conversation stopped. Soldiers turned to look at the new lieutenant who was questioning their most respected officer. "Maybe," Doyen continued. "The ranking system here needs to be updated. Numbers do not lie." The silence stretched for long seconds. Then, from the back of the room, came the sound of steady footsteps. Captain Lee Minji walked through the crowd of soldiers. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes never left Doyen's face. She stopped at his table and looked down at him. "You think numbers tell the whole story?" "They tell the important story," Doyen replied. Meeting her gaze, Minji reached into her tactical vest and pulled out a small data stick. She placed it on the table in front of him with careful precision. "Start at folder 1, she said quietly. The mess hall remained completely silent. Every soldier watched the exchange with wide eyes. Doyen looked at the data stick, then back at Minji. "What is this?" "Your education," she said simply, then turned and walked away. Dojan picked up the data stick and turned it over in his hands. It was plain black plastic, no markings or labels. Around him, soldiers began to return to their conversations, but he could feel their eyes watching him. He looked toward the door where Captain Lee had disappeared. For the first time since arriving at the base, he felt uncertain. The confidence that had carried him through every previous assignment suddenly felt hollow. The data stick was small and light. Somehow it felt heavy in his hand. Whatever was stored on it, he knew it would change everything. He just did not know how. Doyen sat alone in his quarters, staring at the data stick in his palm. The small device felt heavier than his rifle. Outside, the base was quiet except for the night patrol walking their rounds. He had been holding the stick for 2 hours, but had not yet plugged it into his computer. He kept thinking about Captain Lee's words. "Start at folder 1. Her voice had been calm, but there was something else in it. Something that made him hesitate. Finally, he inserted the stick into his computer terminal. The screen flickered and displayed a simple menu. There were 6 folders, labeled Folder 1 through Folder 6. Each folder showed a date range. Folder 1 was marked 3 years ago, Kepler 4-4 to b. Doyon had heard of Kepler 4-2b. It was a farming world on the outer edge of human space. He remembered reading about some kind of attack there, but the details were not clear in his memory. Most frontier attacks were small raids that ended quickly. Clicked on Folder 1. The first file was a mission briefing marked Classified Colonial Defense Only. The header showed Captain Lee Minji's name and rank from 3 years ago. Back then, she had been a lieutenant, just like him now. Doyon began reading the briefing. A Player 442b was home to 50,000 human colonists. Most were farmers who had never seen combat. They grew food crops that fed 3 other worlds in the sector. The planet had minimal defenses, just a small security force and 1 military unit. The military unit was the 15th Sniper Squad. 12 soldiers total. Lieutenant Lee Mingi was the squad leader. The briefing described the incoming threat. Krek's forces had been spotted moving toward the planet. Intelligence suggested a raid on the farming equipment, maybe some stolen supplies. Standard frontier harassment. Doyon frowned. This seemed like routine information. Why would Captain Lee want him to read old mission reports? He opened the next file. This one was different. It was a personal log entry from Lieutenant Lee dated 3 days after the briefing, Day 1 of the Kepler 4-2b deployment. We arrived this morning and met with the colonial administrator. The colonists are worried, but they think this will be a short raid. They have moved some of their equipment to secure storage areas. Most families are staying in their homes. The log continued. I have positioned my squad around the main settlement. We have good sightlines to all approach routes. If the Kreks come, we will be ready. Doyon opened the next log entry, Day 2. Krek scouts were spotted at dawn. They are not behaving like raiders. They're studying the settlement very carefully. I have requested additional support from command. Request denied. All available units are assigned to other missions. The next entry made Doyon sit up straighter. Day 3. The attack began at 0400 hours. This is not a raid. This is an extermination operation. The Kreks are not after supplies. They're killing civilians. Doyon clicked through more files quickly. Each one revealed more horror. The Kreks were not just attacking the settlement. They were hunting down individual families across the entire planet. They moved from farm to farm, killing everyone they found. A video file caught his attention. The file name was Settlement Defense Day 4. He opened it. The video showed the view through a sniper scope. In the distance, a small farmhouse was burning. Krek soldiers were moving around the building in organized groups. They were not looting, they were searching. The scope view moved to focus on a family running across an open field. A man, a woman, and 2 small children. They were heading toward the main settlement where the human defenders were waiting. Behind them, 3 Krek soldiers were giving chase. The aliens moved fast on their 4 legs. They would catch the family before they reached safety. Doyon watched the crosshairs track the lead Krek soldier. The view was steady despite the long range. Scope showed the distance. 800 meters. A difficult shot, but not impossible. The rifle fired. The lead Krek soldier dropped. The crosshairs moved to the second alien. Another shot, another kill. The third Krek soldier stopped and looked around, trying to find where the shots came from. The scope tracked the third alien as it started running back toward cover. The shot took longer to line up because the target was moving. When the rifle fired, the alien stumbled and fell. The family kept running. They reached the settlement safely. At the bottom of the video, there was a simple note. Civilian saves. 4. Confirmed kills. 3. Doyon opened more video files. Each one showed similar scenes. Krek soldiers hunting civilians, and Lieutenant Lee stopping them with precise shots. The videos were taken from different positions around the settlement. Sometimes the range was close, sometimes very far. Every shot was perfect. But the videos showed something else. They showed how many Krek soldiers there were. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They moved in organized groups, each group hunting different areas of the planet. One video showed Lieutenant Lee's position being overrun. She had to move fast, carrying her rifle and equipment. Behind her, Krek's soldiers were setting up their own weapons to shoot back. The video ended with her reaching a new position. She set up her rifle and immediately started shooting again. This time, she was protecting a group of civilians who were trying to reach the evacuation ships. Doyen found a tactical report from Day 5. Squad casualties. Corporal Jin, KIA Sergeant. Park KIA, Private Kim Kia. Squad strength reduced to 9. Krek's forces estimated at 2,000 plus. Civilian evacuation, 23% complete. Day 6 report. Squad casualties. Sergeant Yoon, KIA. Private Lee, KIA. Corporal Nam Kia. Squad strength reduced to 6. Krek's forces have surrounded the main settlement. Civilian evacuation, 45% complete. Day 7 report. Squad casualties. Lieutenant Song, KIA. Private Choi, KIA. Corporal Jang Kia. Squad strength reduced to 3. Krek's forces have breached the outer defenses. Civilian evacuation, 67% complete. Doyan felt his stomach tighten. In 1 week, Lieutenant Lee had lost 9 of her 12 soldiers. But the evacuation was continuing. People were still getting to safety. He found a video file labeled Last Stand, Day 8. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. The video showed the evacuation landing zone. Hundreds of civilians were crowded around 3 transport ships. Ships were loading people as fast as possible. But there were still many people waiting. Around the landing zone, Krek soldiers were advancing. They had broken through the human defenses and were closing in on the evacuation site. The video switched to a scope view. Lieutenant Lee was in a position overlooking the landing zone. She was alone. The scope tracked from target to target, and each shot dropped a Krek soldier, but there were too many enemies. For every alien she killed, 2 more appeared. The scope view showed her ammunition counter getting lower. She was running out of bullets. The video showed her making impossible shots. Krek soldiers at extreme range, moving fast, partially hidden behind cover. Every shot had to count because she did not have ammunition to waste. At the bottom of the screen, counter showed the evacuation progress. 78% complete, 79%, 80%. The scope view showed Krek soldiers getting closer to the landing zone. Were only 100 meters away from the civilians. Lieutenant Lee was shooting as fast as she could reload. 85% complete, 87%, 90%. The last transport ship was almost full. The remaining civilians were running up the loading ramp. Ship's engines were already spinning up for takeoff. The scope view showed a group of Krek soldiers making a final charge toward the ship. They were close enough to reach it before it could lift off. Lieutenant Lee's rifle fired rapidly. 1 Krek soldier fell, then another. But there were still more coming. The ammunition counter showed 0. The video ended. Doyan sat back in his chair, breathing hard. He opened the next file, which was the final report from Kepler 44-B. Day 8, final report. Lieutenant Lee Minji, 15th Sniper Squad. Squad casualties, 11 KIA, 1 survivor. Civilian evacuation, 91% complete. Estimated civilians saved, 45,500. Confirmed enemy kills, 267. Mission status, success. At the bottom of the report was a handwritten note. Recommend Lieutenant Lee for immediate promotion and commendation. Without her actions, the entire civilian population would have been lost. Her sacrifice saved an entire world. Doyan stared at the screen. 267 kills in 8 days. But that was not the important number. The important number was 45,500, the people who lived because of her actions. He thought about his own recent missions. His targets had been Krek soldiers attacking military convoys or patrol units. Important work, but not the same as this. He had never fought to save helpless civilians. He had never been the last line of defense between aliens and innocent families. He opened one more file. It was a video message from Lieutenant Lee, recorded after the battle. She looked exhausted. Her uniform was torn and dirty. Her eyes were red from stress and lack of sleep. Command, this is Lieutenant Lee reporting. The evacuation is complete. The remaining civilians are safe. I am ready for immediate redeployment to wherever I am needed most. Her voice was steady, but Do-yeon could hear the pain in it. She had lost 11 friends in 1 week. She had watched an entire planet burn, but she was volunteering to do it again. The video ended with her looking directly at the camera. The numbers do not matter. The people matter. Every shot I take for them. Do-yeon closed the files and removed the data stick. He sat in silence for a long time, thinking about what he had seen. Captain Lee's kill count was not lower because she was less skilled. It was lower because she fought different battles. Harder. Battles. Battles where the stakes were not military objectives, but human lives. He looked at his own service record lying on the desk. His numbers looked different now. They were still impressive, but they told only part of the story. They did not show who he had fought for or why. For the first time since arriving at the base, Do-yeon felt uncertain about his own abilities. He was a good marksman, maybe even an excellent one. But was he a good soldier? Could he do what Captain Lee had done on Kepler-4 for 2B? He picked up the data stick again. There were still 5 more folders to explore. The folder 1 had taught him this much. What would the others show him? Outside his window, the base was quiet. But somewhere in the galaxy, there were other worlds like Kepler-4 for it to be. Other families who might need protection. Other battles where the numbers would not matter. As much as the people, Do-yeon realized he had a lot more to learn. The next morning, Do-yeon woke up tired. He had stayed awake most of the night thinking about folder 1. The images from Kepler-4 to be kept playing in his mind. Families running from alien hunters, Lieutenant Lee making impossible shots to save, people she had never met. He ate breakfast alone, avoiding the other soldiers. When they tried to talk to him about his latest mission success, he just nodded and walked away. The praise felt hollow now. That afternoon, he returned to his quarters and opened folder 2. The first file was titled Kepler-4, for to be days 9, 10, and 11. Do-yeon frowned. The evacuation had ended on day 8. Why were there 3 more days of reports? Opened the file and found his answer. The evacuation had saved 91% of the civilians. But that meant 4,500 people were still trapped on the planet. They were scattered across remote farms and hidden shelters. Too far from the landing zone to reach the transport ships, the file contained Lieutenant Lee's personal log from day 9. I have remained on planet to search for survivors, Command ordered. Me to evacuate with the transports, but I refused.
How?
There are still people alive down here. I can hear their distress signals on the emergency frequency. Do-yeon opened a tactical map showing the planet's surface. Red dots marked Krek's positions. Blue dots showed confirmed survivor locations. There were dozens of blue dots spread across hundreds of kilometers. Lieutenant Lee was alone, no backup. No support team, no resupply, just her rifle, her equipment, and her determination to save every person she could find. The next file was a video log from day 9. Lieutenant Lee was moving through a burned forest, carrying her rifle and a heavy pack. She looked exhausted, but she kept walking. Survivor Group Alpha 7 should be in this area, she said to the camera. Family of 6, including elderly grandparents who could not make it to the evacuation zone. Last contact was 18 hours ago. Da-da-da-da-da. Video showed her finding the family hiding in a cave. They were terrified, hungry, and injured. Grandparents could barely walk. The children were crying quietly. I am Lieutenant Lee, she told them. I am here to get you to safety. The video showed her helping the family move through dangerous terrain. She carried the youngest child while supporting one of the grandparents. Every few minutes, she had to stop and scan the area for Krek's patrols. At one point, she spotted 3 Krek soldiers searching a nearby farm. She handed the child to his mother and set up her rifle. The shots were quick and precise. The aliens never knew what hit them. Stay close, she told the family. We are almost there. The video ended with the family reaching a hidden shelter where other survivors were waiting. Lieutenant Lee had set up a safe zone where she could protect multiple groups until a rescue mission could reach them. Do-yeon opened more files. Each one showed Lieutenant Lee moving across the planet, finding isolated survivors and bringing them to safety. She worked without rest, sometimes for 20 hours straight. A medical report from day 10 showed her condition: severe dehydration, exhaustion, and several minor injuries from moving through debris, but she refused to stop working. "There are still people out there," she had told the medical officer over radio. "I will rest when everyone is safe." One video file made Do-yeon's hands clench into fists. It showed Lieutenant Lee finding a farmhouse that had been attacked by Krek soldiers. The family inside was dead, parents and 3 children killed while trying to hide in their basement. Lieutenant Lee. Lee stood in the ruined house for several minutes, just looking at the victims. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and strained. "I was too late," she said. "I should have found them sooner." She spent an hour burying the family behind their house. She marked each grave with a simple wooden cross, stood over the graves and made a promise: "I will not let this happen again. Every person I find from now on will make it home." The next file showed her keeping that promise. She moved faster, worked harder, and took bigger risks. She started carrying wounded survivors on her back when they could not walk. She shared her food and water even when her own supplies were running low. A video from day 11 showed her most dangerous rescue. A family of 4 was trapped in a building surrounded by Krek soldiers. The aliens were trying to break down the door. Lieutenant Lee was 300 meters away on top of a hill. She had a clear shot at the Krek soldiers, but killing them would reveal her position to other enemy units in the area. She made the choice anyway. Her rifle fired rapidly. 4 Krek soldiers fell in seconds. But her muzzle flash gave away her location. More aliens started moving toward her position. She ran down the hill toward the trapped family.
Ouch.
"Move," she shouted. The video showed her leading the family through a maze of burning buildings while Krek soldiers chased them. She stopped several times to return fire, always making sure to stay between the aliens and the civilians. They reached the safe zone just as enemy reinforcements arrived. Lieutenant Lee set up her rifle at the zone's perimeter and held off the attack until the aliens withdrew. The family was safe. But the rescue had cost her. She had used most of her remaining ammunition and revealed the safe zone's location to the enemy. The final file in Folder 2 was a rescue mission report. On day 12, a human strike team had finally reached the planet. They found Lieutenant Lee and 847 survivors at the hidden safe zone. She had spent 4 days alone, moving across a hostile planet, finding and protecting every person she could. Her final count was 4,500 additional lives saved. But there was a cost. The medical report from the rescue team was difficult to read. Lieutenant Lee was suffering from severe exhaustion, dehydration, and psychological trauma. She had not slept more than 2 hours at a time in over a week. The psychological evaluation was even worse. Patient shows signs of severe stress reaction. Recommends immediate medical leave and therapy. Patient has experienced the loss of 11 squad members and witnessed extensive civilian casualties. At the bottom of the report was Lieutenant Lee's response to the medical recommendation: request denied. Immediate redeployment to active combat zone. There are other worlds that need protection. Do-yeon found one more file. It was a personal video message that Lieutenant Lee had recorded for the families of her fallen squad members. She had made 11 separate videos, one for each soldier who died on Kepler-44b. He opened the first one. It was addressed to the family of Corporal Jin, who was killed on day 5. "Mr. and Mrs. Jin," Lieutenant Lee said, "I am writing to tell you about your son's final days. He died protecting innocent people. He saved at least 200 civilians before he fell." She talked about Corporal Jin's courage, his skill, and his dedication. She remembered specific moments when he had made difficult shots to protect families. She told his parents exactly how he had died quickly and without pain, while holding his position so others could escape. He was a good soldier and a good man, she concluded. I am sorry I could not bring him home to you. Dajen watched several more videos. Each one was personal and detailed. Lieutenant Lee remembered everything about her soldiers, their fears, their hopes, their families back home. She carried the weight of their deaths like a physical burden. The last video was different. It was not addressed to a family. It was a message to herself, recorded late at night in the safe zone. I lost 11 good people, she said. 11. Soldiers who trusted me to lead them. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. Maybe if I had positioned them better or made different tactical decisions, some of them would still be alive. She was quiet for a long moment. But I cannot change what happened. I can only make sure their deaths meant something. Every person we saved, every family that went home, that is their memorial. The video ended with her looking directly at the camera. The hardest part is not taking the shot. It is living with all the people you could not save. Doyen closed the files and sat back in his chair. He understood now why Captain Lee's kill count was lower than his. She was not just a sniper. She was a protector. Every shot she took was carefully chosen to save lives, not just to eliminate enemies. He thought about his own recent missions. He had focused on getting the highest kill count possible. He had taken shots at distant targets that posed no immediate threat to civilians. He had competed with other soldiers to see who could kill more enemies, but Lieutenant Lee, now Captain Lee, had fought different battles. She had made harder choices. She had carried wounded civilians to safety. She had spent days without sleep, protecting people she had never met. He looked at the data stick again. There were still 4 more folders. If folder 2 had shown him this much about sacrifice and leadership, what would the others contain? Outside his window, the base was busy with normal activities. Soldiers were training, maintaining equipment, and preparing for missions. But Doyen knew that somewhere in the galaxy, there were other planets like Kepler-44 to be, other families, who might need protection. He realized that being a good soldier was not just about being accurate with a rifle. It was about being willing to sacrifice for others. It was about making the hard choices when lives were on the line. Captain Lee had made those choices. She had paid the price for her decisions. And she had volunteered to do it again. On world after world, for people she would never meet. For the first time since arriving at the base, Dojan felt humble. Doyen spent the next day on a routine patrol mission. His team swept through a canyon looking for Krek scouts. He found nothing, but Doyen could not focus on the work. His mind kept returning to the data stick and what he had learned about Captain Lee. When he returned to base that evening, he went straight to his quarters. He needed to see what was in folder 3. The folder opened to reveal files marked classified command level only. These were not personal logs or mission reports. These were intelligence documents from military headquarters. The first file was titled Strategic Assessment, Krek's Military Operations. Doyen had never seen documents at this level before. His security clearance had always limited him to tactical information about specific missions. He began reading and quickly realized this was much bigger than individual battles. The file contained a galaxy-wide map showing human colonies and Krek's attack patterns. Red lines connected dozens of worlds where attacks had occurred over the past 5 years. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The Kreks were not conducting random raids. They were systematically attacking human settlements in a specific order. They started with the smallest, most isolated colonies and worked their way toward larger population centers. Each attack followed the same pattern. First, scout units would study the target for weeks. Then, overwhelming force would arrive to eliminate all human presence. Finally, Krek's colonists would move in to claim the territory. This was not war. This was extermination followed by territorial expansion. Doyen found a detailed analysis of Krek's tactics. The aliens were patient and methodical. They studied each human world carefully, learning about defenses, population centers, and evacuation routes. When they attacked, they knew exactly how to cause maximum damage with minimum losses. The next file made his blood run cold. Target list of upcoming Krek's operations. 47 human worlds were marked for attack over the next 2 years. The list included population numbers, defensive capabilities, and estimated time needed for complete elimination. At the bottom of each world entry was a recommendation for human defensive response. Most entries said evacuation recommended insufficient defenses. Few said standard military response, delaying action only. Only 3 entries said specialist deployment recommended. Deployment. Found a classified personnel file that made him sit up straight. The file was about Captain Lee Minji. According to the document, Captain Lee was not just another sniper. She was classified as a priority asset by military intelligence. Her success at Kepler 442b had marked her as one of the few soldiers capable of conducting successful defensive operations against Krek's extermination forces. The file contained a psychological profile that was both impressive and disturbing. Subject shows exceptional tactical intelligence and stress tolerance, capable of operating alone for extended periods under extreme conditions. Primary motivation appears to be protection of civilian populations rather than personal advancement. Was also a section marked Combat Effectiveness Assessment. It compared Captain Lee's performance to other elite soldiers across the human military. Her kill-to-ammunition ratio was the highest on record. Her civilian save rate was unmatched. Her ability to operate without support was considered extraordinary. But the most interesting part was a section. It's called Strategic Impact Analysis. The document explained that Captain Lee's actions at Kepler 442b had disrupted Krek's planning for the entire sector. Aliens had expected to eliminate the population and claim the world within days. Instead, they had lost over 2,000 soldiers and gained nothing. More importantly, her success had forced the Kreks to change their tactics. They now assigned larger forces to each attack, which slowed down their expansion schedule. They also developed new strategies specifically designed to counter human sniper teams. Doyon found a folder labeled Enemy Intelligence Files. Inside were intercepted Krek's communications about human defensive capabilities. Most of the communications were routine tactical reports, but several mentioned Captain Lee by name. One communication was marked High Priority Elimination Target. It was a bounty notice. The Krek's military command had placed a reward on Captain Lee's head equivalent to the cost of a small warship. They wanted her dead more than any other human soldier. The bounty notice included a detailed description of her tactics and capabilities. The Kreks had studied her methods carefully and developed specific countermeasures. They knew she preferred long-range engagements. They knew she prioritized civilian protection over enemy elimination. They knew she often operated alone. Most disturbing of all, they knew her psychological profile. The target shows emotional attachment to civilian welfare. Will accept tactical disadvantage to protect non-combatants. Recommended approach. Use civilian populations as tactical advantage. Doyon realized the implications. The Kreks were not just trying to kill Captain Lee. They were planning to use her compassion against her. They would put civilians in danger, specifically to force her into unfavorable positions. He found more files showing how this strategy was already being implemented. Recent Kreks attacks had changed their pattern. Instead of quick elimination raids, they were conducting slower operations designed to draw out human defenders. They would capture civilian areas and wait for rescue attempts. Several human heroes had died walking into these traps. Good soldiers who tried to save innocent people and found themselves surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces, but Captain Lee had survived these traps repeatedly. The files showed mission after mission where she had outmaneuvered Krek's forces despite being specifically targeted. She had developed new tactics to counter their countermeasures. One mission report described how she had saved a mining colony by pretending to fall into a Krek's trap. She had let the aliens think they had surrounded her, then used their own tactical positions against them. While they focused on her supposed location, she eliminated their command structure from an unexpected angle. Another report showed how she had protected a civilian convoy by creating false radio traffic. She made the Kreks think there were multiple human sniper teams in the area, causing them to spread their forces too thin to be effective. Doyon opened a file labeled Tactical Innovation Database. It contained dozens of new fighting techniques that Captain Lee had developed. Each technique was designed to protect civilians while engaging superior enemy forces. Many of these techniques had been distributed to other human military units across the galaxy. Soldiers on dozens of worlds were using Captain Lee's methods to protect their own populations. He found training videos where military instructors taught her techniques to new recruits. The lie maneuver was now standard training for all sniper teams. Lie positioning was required learning for defensive operations, but the most important file was labeled Mission Assignment History. Doyon opened it and found a complete list of Captain Lee's deployments over the past 3 years. She had been sent to 37 different worlds. In every case, she had been assigned to the most dangerous positions with the least support, while other snipers rotated through safe assignments and easy targets. Captain Lee repeatedly volunteered for the worst missions. She specifically requested deployment to worlds where civilian populations were threatened. The file showed her mission selection criteria. She always chose assignments where the risk to civilians was highest. She preferred worlds where other military units had failed or been withdrawn. She took missions that other soldiers considered impossible. Doyon cross-referenced her mission list with his own recent assignments. A pattern emerged that made him feel ashamed. Many of his high-kill missions had been possible because Captain Lee had already done the dangerous work. She had eliminated key Krex commanders, disrupted their communication networks, and weakened their tactical positions. His easy targets had been made easy by her prior actions. The convoy attack where he had scored 43 kills in 2 hours. Captain Lee had spent the previous week hunting the Krex leaders who were organizing convoy attacks. His targets had been confused and disorganized because their command structure was already destroyed. The patrol elimination where he had killed 26 enemies in 30 minutes. Captain Lee had been tracking that patrol for days, learning their patterns and weaknesses. She had identified their route and scheduled his team's intercept. His impressive kill count was not just the result of his own skill. It was built on a foundation of intelligence gathering, tactical preparation, and strategic planning that Captain Lee had provided. The final file and folder 3 was labeled Personal Request, Captain Lee, M. It was a formal request for transfer to the most dangerous assignment available. Captain Lee had specifically asked to be sent to worlds where other human forces had already failed. She wanted the impossible missions that other soldiers avoided. At the bottom of the request was a simple explanation. I volunteer for these assignments because someone has to take them. If I do not go, those people will die. I cannot accept safe assignments while civilians are being murdered on worlds where I could make a difference. The request had been approved immediately. Doyon closed the files and stared at his computer screen. Everything he thought he knew about military service had been wrong. He had focused on personal achievement and impressive statistics. But Captain Lee focused on strategic impact and civilian protection. She was not just a better soldier because of her shooting skills. She was a better soldier because she understood what they were really fighting for. While he competed for the highest kill count, she fought to save entire worlds. The data stick again. There were still 3 more folders, and each one had taught him something that changed his understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. Outside his window, the base was quiet in the evening darkness. But somewhere in the galaxy, Krex forces were planning their next attack on a human world. Somewhere, families were sleeping peacefully, not knowing that alien hunters were studying their homes and planning their deaths. Somewhere, soldiers like Captain Lee were preparing to stand between those families and extinction. It's not for glory or statistics, but because it was the right thing to do. Doyon realized he had never really understood what they were fighting for until now. Doyon did not sleep well that night. He kept thinking about the strategic files and what they meant. When morning came, he skipped breakfast and went straight to his quarters. He needed to know what was in folder 4. The folder opened to reveal files with a different feel. These were not tactical reports or intelligence documents. The first file was labeled Personal Communications Thank You Letters. Doyon opened it and found hundreds of messages from civilians. Each one was addressed to Captain Lee. From families she had saved during various missions, The first letter was from a woman named Mrs. Park. Dear Captain Lee, I do not know if you remember me, but you saved my children on Kepler 4 for to be my daughter. Was only 4 years old when you carried her to the evacuation ship. She is 7 now and still talks about the brave soldier who rescued her. Thank you for giving her a future. Another letter was from a man whose parents had been trapped in a mining station. Captain Lee, because of you my parents got to see their grandchildren grow up. My father lived 3 more years after you saved him. He talked about you every day, said you were the bravest person he ever met. There were letters from teachers whose students had been saved, letters from doctors whose patients had survived, letters from children who drew pictures of Captain Lee rescuing their families. One letter made Do-yeon's eyes water. It was from a teenage girl. Captain Lee, you saved my little brother when he was just a baby. He is 5 now and loves to play. Soldier. He says he wants to be just like you when he grows up. Not because you're a good fighter, but because you help people. The letters went on for pages. Farmers whose crops had been saved, miners whose equipment had been protected, communities that existed because Captain Lee had stood between them and extinction. But the letters also showed something else. They showed that Captain Lee remembered every person she had saved. Many of the letters mentioned details that only she would know. A child's favorite toy that she had helped recover, an elderly man's medicine that she had retrieved from a burning, building a family pet that she had rescued along with its owners. Do-yeon found video messages that families had sent. In one video, a whole town had gathered to record a thank you message. Men, women, and children all spoke about how Captain Lee had saved their community. They had named their new school after her. Another video showed a wedding. The bride and groom had met in an evacuation shelter that Captain Lee had protected. They wanted her to know that their happiness was possible because of her sacrifice. But Folder 4 contained more than thank you messages. It also contained the darker side. Of Captain Lee's service, Do-yeon found a file labeled Medical Records, Psychological Evaluation. The file was thick with reports from military doctors and therapists. Each report showed the growing mental strain of constant combat. The first evaluation was from right after. Kepler 4-4 to B. Patient shows signs of severe stress reaction and survivor. Guilt recommends immediate leave and counseling. Patient has witnessed extensive trauma and loss of squad members. Captain Lee had refused the medical leave. She had requested immediate redeployment to active combat zones. The second evaluation was 6 months later. Patient continues to show signs of chronic stress, sleep disorders, hypervigilance, and difficulty with emotional regulation. Strongly recommends extended medical leave. Patient's psychological state may impact mission effectiveness. Again, Captain Lee had refused medical leave. She had volunteered for an assignment to a world where Krek's forces were attacking civilian settlements. The evaluations continued over 3 years. Each one showed the accumulating damage of constant warfare. The doctors noted that Captain Lee was carrying the psychological weight of every mission, every loss, every person she could not save. One evaluation included a conversation transcript. A military psychologist had tried to convince Captain Lee to accept medical treatment. Captain, you have saved thousands of lives. You have done more than any soldier should be asked to do. You need to take care of yourself. Captain Lee's response was simple. While I am sitting in a medical facility, people are dying. I cannot rest while there are still worlds that need protection. But if you push yourself too hard, you might not be able to help anyone. Then I will push myself as hard as I can for as long as I can. When I finally break, at least I will know I did everything possible. Do-yeon found another file labeled Personal Video Logs, Night Recordings. These were videos that Captain Lee had made for herself late at night when she could not sleep. In one video, she talked about the families she had failed to save. I keep thinking about the Johnson family on Kepler 4 for 2B. If I had moved faster, if I had positioned myself better, maybe I could have reached them in time. Their youngest daughter was only 3 years old. Another video showed her talking about the soldiers who had died under her command. Corporal Kim had a wife and new baby back home. Showed me their picture every day. He was so excited to meet his son. Should have kept him safer. Should have made better tactical decisions. The video showed Captain Lee carrying guilt. For every loss, even when the losses were beyond her control, she blamed herself for not being faster, not being smarter, not being in two places at once. But the videos also showed her determination. I cannot bring back the people I failed to save. But I can make sure their deaths were not meaningless. Every person I save from now on is a memorial to the ones I lost. Doyen found medical reports that showed the physical toll of her service. Multiple injuries from combat and rescue operations. Chronic fatigue from operating without adequate rest. Malnutrition from sharing her food with civilian survivors. One report documented how she had broken 3 ribs during a rescue operation, but had continued fighting for 2 more days before seeking medical attention. She had not wanted to delay the mission while civilians were in danger. Another report showed that she had contracted a serious infection from drinking contaminated water during a mission. She had given her clean water to injured civilians and made herself sick to keep them healthy. The file contained a letter from a military doctor who had treated Captain Lee multiple times. This soldier consistently puts the welfare of others above her own health and safety. She will ignore serious injuries if she believes her mission is not complete. I have never seen such dedication to duty, but I am concerned about the long-term impact on her physical and mental health. Doyen opened a file labeled Personal Belongings, Recovered Items. It contained photos and documents that had been found in Captain Lee's quarters after various missions. There were photos of every civilian she had saved, not just group pictures, but individual portraits. She had somehow obtained photos of hundreds of people whose lives she had touched, kept them in a special album that she carried with her. Everywhere there were also photos of every soldier who had died under her command. She had written personal notes on the back of each photo, describing their character, their dreams, and their final moments. But the most heartbreaking item was a notebook filled with names and dates. It was a memorial list that Captain Lee maintained. Personally, every civilian who had died during her missions was listed with their full name, age, and family information. At the bottom of each page was a simple note. I remember you. Your death was not meaningless. I will honor your memory by saving others. The notebook had over 3,000 names. Doyen realized that Captain Lee carried the weight of every person she could not save. While he celebrated his successful kills, she mourned every life that was lost, despite her efforts. He found one more file that made him understand the full scope of her sacrifice. It was a letter that Captain Lee had written, but never sent. It was addressed to her family back on Earth. Dear family, I know you worry about me, but I want you to understand why I cannot come home yet. There are people in this galaxy who will die if I am not here to protect them. I have been given skills and opportunities that most soldiers do not have. With those gifts comes responsibility. I know I am not the same person who left Earth 3 years ago, or changes people, and I have seen things that will stay with me forever. But I have also saved lives that would have been lost without me. That knowledge gives meaning to all the pain and sacrifice. I may never be able to return to the peaceful life I once knew, but I can make sure that other families get to keep their peaceful lives. Other children get to grow up safe. Other parents get to watch their children become adults. If something happens to me, please know that my life had purpose. Every day I spend fighting. Every night I cannot sleep. Every scar I carry, they all mean something because they represent people who went home to their families. I love you all. But I cannot come home while there are still people who need me. Here, the letter was dated 6 months ago. Doyen closed the files and sat in silence for a long time. He had always thought of military service as a job, something you did to earn recognition and advancement. But Captain Lee saw it as a calling. She had given up her old life completely to protect people she would never meet. She carried the psychological weight of every mission, every loss, every person she could not save. She ignored her own health and safety to prioritize the welfare of others. She measured her success not by her kill count, but by the number of people who survived because of. Doyen had avoided the mess hall for 3 days. He could not face the other soldiers while the weight of what he had learned pressed down on him. On the 4th morning, he finally opened folder 5. The folder was different from the others. Instead of mission reports or personal files, it contained testimonials from every person who had served with Captain Lee. Hundreds of statements from soldiers, officers, support staff, and civilians. The first file was from Commander Kim Seojin himself. I have commanded military units for 22 years. In that time, I have seen many brave soldiers and skilled fighters, but I've never seen anyone like Captain Lee Minji. She does not fight for glory or advancement. She fights because she cannot stand to see innocent people suffer, the commander's statement continued. I have offered Captain Lee promotion to Major 5 times. Each time, she has refused. She says that higher rank would take her away from field operations where she can directly protect civilians. She would rather stay a captain and save lives than become a major and push papers. Another testimonial was from a supply sergeant who had worked with Captain Lee on multiple missions. She always gives her food rations to hungry civilians. Have seen her go without eating for days so that refugee children could have more food. When I try to give her extra supplies, she just asks me to give them to the families instead, Medical Corpsman wrote. Captain Lee brings wounded civilians to the aid station before she treats her own injuries. I have seen her carry injured children for kilometers while she was bleeding from shrapnel wounds. She will not accept medical treatment until every civilian has been cared for. But the most revealing testimonial came from a junior officer who had served under Captain Lee's command during a mission to protect a farming colony. I thought I understood courage before I served with Captain Lee, the officer wrote. I was wrong. Real courage is not about being fearless. Real courage is about being terrified, but doing what needs to be done anyway. Captain Lee is afraid every time she goes into battle. She is afraid of failing the people who depend on her. But she goes anyway, the testimonial continued. During the Harvest Moon operation, our unit was assigned to protect 8,000 civilians from a Krex assault force. We were outnumbered 10 to 1. Any other commander would have ordered a fighting withdrawal to save the soldiers. Captain Lee ordered us to hold position until every civilian was evacuated. Doyen read the details of the Harvest Moon operation. Captain Lee had positioned her small unit between the Krex forces and the civilian evacuation site. For 18 hours, they had held their ground against overwhelming odds. She made impossible shots from impossible positions, the officer wrote. But more importantly, she made impossible decisions. When we ran low on ammunition, she gave her bullets to the soldiers who had better angles on enemy positions. When Krex forces broke through our left flank, she personally led the counterattack, even though it meant exposing herself to enemy fire. The operation had saved all 8,000 civilians. Captain Lee's unit had suffered 60% casualties. Wounded 3 times but refused evacuation until the mission was complete. Another testimonial came from Sergeant Choi Nari, Captain Lee's current spotter. But this statement revealed something that shocked Doyon. I was not always a soldier, Sergeant Choi wrote. 3 years ago, I was a civilian living on Kepler 44 to be with my family, my parents, my younger brother, and my grandmother. We were farmers who had never seen war. Doyon realized he was reading the statement of one of the civilians that Captain Lee had saved during that first terrible mission. When the Krex attacked our world, my family tried to reach the evacuation ships, Sergeant Choi continued. But my grandmother was too old and weak to make the journey. We were hiding in our farmhouse. When the aliens found us, the statement described how Krex soldiers had surrounded the farmhouse. They were preparing to break down the door when Captain Lee's rifle fire stopped them. She held them off for 6 hours while we waited for rescue, Sergeant Choi wrote. During that time, she talked to us over the radio. She told us that help was coming. She promised that we would see our family again. Her voice was the only thing that kept us from giving up hope, but the rescue had come at a terrible cost. During the firefight, Sergeant Choi's parents and grandmother had been killed by Krex weapons fire. Only she and her younger brother had survived. Captain Lee came to the farmhouse after the battle. The statement continued. She found me holding my dead family, was 17 years old and had lost everything. She sat with me for an hour, just talking. She did not try to tell me that everything would be okay. She just promised that their deaths would not be meaningless. After the evacuation, Sergeant Choi had joined the military specifically to serve with Captain Lee. She saved my life, but more than that, she showed me what it means to protect others. I became a soldier because I wanted to be like her. I wanted to make sure that other families would not suffer like mine did. Doyen found testimonials from dozens of other soldiers who had similar stories. People who had been saved by Captain Lee as civilians and then joined the military to serve under her command. They formed the core of her unit, people who had first-hand experience of what she was fighting for. One testimonial was from a pilot who had participated in the Kepler-4 for to be evacuation. I have flown thousands of evacuation missions, but I will never forget that one. When I landed to pick up the last group of survivors, Captain Lee was standing at the loading ramp personally helping each person onto the ship. She knew many of them by name. She remembered their children, their pets, their fears. The pilot's statement continued. After everyone was loaded, I told her to get on board. She looked back at the burning planet and said, "There might be more people out there." I had to physically pull her onto the ship to prevent her from going back to search for more survivors. Another file contained statements from enemy soldiers, Krek's prisoners who had been captured during various battles. The statements had been translated from the alien language, one Krek's warrior wrote. The human female called Lee is not like other soldiers. She does not kill for pleasure or glory. She kills to protect the weak ones. This makes her more dangerous than 100 normal warriors. She fights with the fury of a mother protecting her children, another Krek statement said. We studied her tactics for many cycles. She makes decisions that seem foolish from a military perspective. She will sacrifice tactical advantage to save non-combatants. But this apparent weakness becomes strength because her soldiers fight harder knowing she values their lives. Final testimonial was from a child, now a teenager, who had been saved by Captain Free during the Kepler-4 to be evacuation. The letter was written in simple, honest language. Dear Captain Lee, I was 4 years old when you saved me and my family. I do not remember much about that scary time, but I remember you. You carried me to the big ship when I was too scared to walk. You told me that everything would be okay, and you were right, the letter continued. I am 16 now, and I want to join the military when I turn 18. It's not because I want to fight, but because I want to help people like you helped me. My parents say I should choose a safer job, but I think some jobs are worth the danger. The teenager ended the letter with a simple request. When I become a soldier, I hope I can serve with you. I want to learn how to be brave like you are. Doyen opened the final folder, folder 6. It contained only one file, labeled personal. Message Lieutenant Park Doyen. His heart pounded as he opened it. Captain Lee had written him a personal message and included it on the data stick. Lieutenant Park, the message began. If you are reading this, it means you have reviewed all the previous folders. I hope they have helped you understand what we are really fighting for. The message continued. I requested your assignment too. This unit because I saw your service record and recognized your potential. You have exceptional skills as a marksman. But more importantly, you have the intelligence and character needed to become a true protector. Doyen read on with growing amazement. Your kill statistics are impressive, but they do not tell the whole story about what kind of soldier you could become. I see in your record the same drive for excellence that all great soldiers possess. The question is whether you will use that drive for personal glory or for something greater. Captain Lee's message explained her philosophy of military service. Numbers are important, but they are not the purpose. The purpose is to protect innocent people from those who would harm them. Every shot we take, every risk we accept, every sacrifice we make, it all has meaning only if it serves that purpose. She concluded with an offer that took Doyen's breath away. I am writing this message because I believe you have the potential to become the kind of soldier this galaxy needs. Someone who fights not for statistics or recognition, but for the people who cannot fight for themselves. Path, I would be honored to serve alongside you. The message ended with a simple statement. The choice is yours. You can continue to be a skilled killer, or you can become a guardian of life. Both paths have value, but only one has meaning. Doyen sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by everything he had learned. 6 folders had shown him the true cost and meaning of military service. Captain Lee had not just given him information, she had given him a chance to understand what kind of person he wanted to become. He looked at his service record one more time. The numbers were still impressive, but they no longer seemed important. What mattered was not how many enemies he had killed, but how many innocent people he had protected. He thought about the families in the thank you letters, the soldiers who had died protecting civilians, and the children who would grow up safe because someone had stood between them and extinction. For the first time since arriving at the base, Do-yeon understood what Captain Lee had meant when she said the numbers did not tell the whole story. The real story was not about statistics or glory. It was about ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things for others. He removed the data stick from his computer and held it in his palm. This small device had contained more than files. In folders, it had contained a lesson about honor, sacrifice, and the true meaning of courage. Tomorrow, he would find Captain Lee and tell her that he understood. He would ask her to teach him how to be the kind of soldier that innocent people could depend on. He would learn how to be a guardian instead of just a killer. The data stick had shown him what he could become. Now he had to choose whether he would take that path. Outside his window, the base was preparing for another day of operations. Somewhere in the galaxy, families were going about their daily lives unaware of the dangers that threatened them. Somewhere, soldiers like Captain Lee were preparing to stand between those families and extinction. Not for glory or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Do-yeon was ready to join them,